artificial intelligence or AI-powered sustainability, fast-tracking positive change, led by Manas Chawla, founder and CEO of London Politica. This panel will delve into how artificial intelligence can accelerate sustainability efforts, featuring discussions on the latest innovation and their implications for the future of sustainable practices.
I'm really excited to be introducing this panel, and I know that the only thing keeping all of you from the fantastic 2 hours of rest you're going to get is this panel, so we'll keep it energetic, light, short, and snappy. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, and if you've been to a conference in the last year, this is something that comes up at every conference, if not at every panel. But my concern was that it comes up often as a buzzword. And so what I wanted to do today was to really drill down into what artificial intelligence is, but specifically how it pertains to ESG, the sustainability industry, how we can mitigate some of the risks associated with AI, and more than anything, how we can capitalize on some of the opportunities presented by AI. And there's quite a few things to discuss, but I wanted to place all the heavy stuff up front because there's a lot of ethical implications of this technology. You can consider something as simple as perhaps the use of AI in supply chain optimization to reduce waste, to improve efficiency, but even that poses a range of complex issues around surveillance, data security, privacy security, and its human rights applications. So Robert, let me start with you, because I'd really love for you to share your insights on what the key legal considerations are that you think companies should keep front of mind when deploying AI technologies, and how they should navigate these. And specifically within the European context, how might the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act help in this?
Well, thank you very much, and happy to be here with all of you. Artificial intelligence, the first thing I say to everyone when I talk about it, don't be afraid, because there's an instinctive sense of, oh my God, this is something I don't understand, and how am I going to deal with this? Everybody's talking about the end of the world. Let's not talk about the end of the world. Let's think about what are the benefits and what are the risks. And I think the interesting thing about AI is, if you're in the business sector and you're not thinking about AI, you have a problem, because ultimately it's a transversal phenomenon. It can impact each and every type of business sector. But so there are three things you have to do. The first is you have to take a position. Are you going to be producing AI systems, which probably you're not going to be, because that's for the big tech companies. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at your business model, and you're going to be asking yourself, how can I leverage AI systems within my business? Now that takes a bit of thinking. When you've decided that you're going to use AI systems, for example, in product counseling or product development, for human resources, for issues of sustainability, to what extent you're going to use AI systems and leverage them to become a more sustainable business, you then have to do a risk assessment. You have to ask yourselves, for the kind of business that I'm engaged in, if I use an AI system, what are the benefits, but what are the risks? Because the regulators, the legal community, the European Union in particular, is saying to businesses, fine, use AI systems, but AI systems create risks. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be found liable if you don't do your homework. So this is not a question of an either or, it's a question of making strategic decisions at the outset. What kind of AI systems are you going to use? What kind of risk profile are they going to have? And we can talk a bit about them more in a moment, because AI is a balance between benefits and harms. And it's not a question of a binary either or, it's a question of finding the balance, and you have to do that proactively as a business. You have to think about how I can incorporate this technology to make my business better, more sustainable, more profitable, but at the same time respectful of the risks and harms that it can produce. And it can be done. It can be done. That's what I'm doing every day, looking at the way this balance can be achieved in any type of business form.
think that sort of sets the scene really well, and in a perfect way perhaps for you to pick up, Erin, because we've perhaps not ever had any technology that moves and evolves and breaks things as fast as artificial intelligence. We know that regulators are scrambling to keep up just with the sheer pace of change here. And when you look to the regulatory landscape around this, perhaps particularly in Europe, are there any key oversights in recent efforts to regulate the use of AI?
From my perspective, there's not a lot of missing legislation. So currently there's an AI Act which is proposed. It is not through yet, but there's a lot of text that companies can look at. What I think is really important, though, is for the regulators to have real deep discussions with business. As Robert said, I work for an airline group. We are going to be the users of AI, or not we are going to be, we are the users. We already use AI and have been using it for many years, different types of AI. But the new risks are about generative AI, to be clear, I think. What I think is very important is the education level of the regulators when they are creating legislation. They have to understand the technology, and to be very honest, there's not the same level of knowledge and expertise within the European business people and makers of AI that there is in the US. So I think really going after very in-depth interviews with all of the researchers that have built this technology is very important. The users as well, of how the use cases start to come about and how companies and individuals intend to use it, also important. But I think that the people who created it are the best people to have the correct opinion about what could be the risks. And for us, we just implemented OpenAI products into our company, and we went through, and I'm in a German context, so very legally minded country with a lot of workers' councils and everything, and went through the process of implementing it in a safe and secure and governance way into our company, and it is going okay. Like, it has gone okay, and it takes a little bit longer than you might want. But it is compliant with the future law, and it is set up in a way that all of the people who are implementing use cases will create an environment in which the company will not fall flat on its face, not have kind of reputational fallout, not make really poor choices with their customers and things like that. So this is what the safety and the risk abatement is about, is to make sure that it doesn't make mistakes for your business, for your customers, for your employees, and to uphold the law. Yeah.
I mean, I like the point you made about going to the people who create AI to really understand how this works and to help regulate it. And I think that's certainly been behind the rise of some of these AI leaders as, massive personalities, when perhaps nobody really knew about them 2 or 3 years ago. You think of Sam Altman in OpenAI, which is the defining company perhaps, or the face of sort of large language models, but it's still only 1,100 employees, right? A relatively small company, right, in the tech sector.
Yeah, or Jonas Sandroulis from like the European Sam Altman. You cannot walk into an event with this guy. He has an entourage now. You cannot speak with him.
Exactly.
Not a nobody. He was a nobody. He was not a recognizable person 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And now he has an entourage of people everywhere he goes, who are just trying to get rid of the.
I mean, in some ways, it's not even an entirely novel phenomenon. I know, Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, is routinely treated like a head of state.
Right.
Microsoft has offices at the United Nations in New York and Geneva. He's approached by heads of state to help create AI policy.
But his market cap is bigger than the GDP of most countries. NVIDIA's market cap just exceeded Canada. Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Bogdan, let me turn to you because you also have a legal background, and to go back to what Robert said, really the defining question here is how can we deploy artificial intelligence in a way that encourages innovation, but we also keep in mind, safeguarding ethical standards. And with a legal perspective, what would your advice be to policymakers that are looking at this issue?
Well, thanks. Well, that's a fantastic question. I mean, it really depends. It boils down to your geography, because frankly, Stanford published 2 days ago a AI Global Index report, which shows that Europe pretty much doesn't exist on the map when it comes to AI. Everything is happening in the States. We don't have full clarity what's happening in China, but we do know that a lot is happening in China. And India is doing interesting things. And if you look at the projections now, we can expect that India is going to become a very interesting market for AI in the next 5 to 10 years. I would be really surprised, and I would really love to hear an optimist that believes that anything will happen in Europe. There was this little French company that was just recently acquired by Microsoft. But other than that, there's literally nothing going on in Europe except innovation in regulation. And I think that that's, maybe this is blasphemy that I'm going to say now, but I think it's a big mistake. I think over-regulating without innovating is why Europe is where it is now, amongst a number of other issues. I think it's one of the rare opportunities for the Adria region and for the UK, the fact that we're outside of the EU, and that this remarkable new piece of legislation, which is the EU AI Act, will not apply to companies in the region and will not apply in the UK. And that will give us a chance to maybe opt for more adaptive and nimble regulation so that we actually foster innovation. Because innovation is key with AI. And, it's in my opinion, it's ridiculous to regulate something that you don't even understand. And at this point, if you start quizzing people about, because there's a big difference. I mean, everything that we knew about AI until the large language models is one scenario. And predictive algorithms were quite simple for anyone who did any basic statistics and math. You would type in probability, would then, based on big data, give you an answer depending on a consumer and your own choices. It was pretty much big data, GDPR issues. And everybody now identifies IP as a big topic, which is fine. But that does not apply to large language models. It's a completely different ballgame. We don't even know how they're programmed. We don't even know how they choose what's appropriate when you type in an answer and what's not. We don't even know why Gemini, 2 months ago, gave us Nazis who were African American, Japanese, and so forth. Those questions, who programmed the LLMs? How is this done? Who trains them? What kind of rules we want? Ethical, but also legal, on people who are actually training them. All of that's a bunch of questions, but that doesn't even happen in our jurisdictions. It happens in the States. So there's a lot more open questions than answers, frankly. And I would, my first topic would be, let's just take it easy with regulating, and instead let's maybe do a little bit more of learning and, researching before we just jump to prohibiting stuff, because it's been a knee-jerk reaction in Europe against big tech, and I deeply believe that it's a wrong way to, approach this.
Yeah, and I might even go, a step further. When you talk about the black box that is actual sort of AI systems, I don't think it's just the case that we don't understand what's going on. I think to a large degree, the very nature of these technologies is that the people who develop them don't understand what's going on. I mean, I work closely with a few companies sort of advising them on these issues. The way the best AI companies, OpenAI, DeepMind, Gemini, the way they test their models, 80-90% of that is adversarial testing. It's red teaming. It's basically using the software through the lens of a malicious actor, pretending to be a malicious actor, and then working backwards to figure out, if you get a nefarious response, where did that come from? What piece of data was wrong? Do we have a wrong parameter or a wrong sort of algorithm? But Ivan, let me turn to you, because you're really familiar with the application of artificial intelligence within Montenegro, and particularly within this region. I mean, are there regulatory mechanisms in place for AI in the Western Balkans? What does that look like, and where should that be going?
Is anyone, when I listen to my colleagues speak, firstly, I would like to thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here today. Regarding the regulations in Western Balkans, Montenegro, I'll say, no, of course, we're not ready. We are doing something, we are doing our best effort, but there are series of problems that follows steps before this. For example, the level of digitalization of Montenegro is currently at low level. We don't use digital signatures. We have lack of the tools which are actually like being used worldwide. Where this comes very important is, for example, cybersecurity level is low. One of the key points for the AI and using AI in any form is basically connected with the cybersecurity and storing the information properly. So when you have something, we had hacking attack 2 years ago, I think now already 2 years. So when you have these vital things, not secured that much, then you're not ready to use AI. Why? AI functions on the even if you just want to, let's say, use it for some administrational tools, you would have to put your information or something like that. You don't have guarantees that will not go out somehow, that somebody will not withdraw your personal information. I'm not saying that's not the case now. I'm saying that if we want to do this properly, when I say Montenegro, I think on the entire Western Balkans, we need to raise our levels of cybersecurity. Where this is a problem because we need to have the same exact level of cybersecurity as, for example, the US, EU, or any other country, and that's very expensive. So, this is not so easy to deal with. But when we're speaking about regulatives, I'll say we will probably follow the EU because EU is our closest entity. But EU has its own problems that my colleague spoke about, because it's full of bureaucracy, and while you are limiting things with bureaucracy, somebody else is advancing in this field like rapidly, and this field by itself, it advances rapidly. So we can just look at ChatGPT year or 1 year ago, for example, the video tool, I forgot the name, and you can look at it now. Now it can make almost perfect videos if we forget about hands and stuff. And where this might be a problem, why? So I'm pro AI, and I agree with probably all that my colleague said. But one thing I do have in mind, I come from the area of cybersecurity initially. So it's a tool. So it depends how you are going to use it. For example, you can misuse it in political terms. Imagine any campaign creating fake videos, publishing them. Before you realize it's deepfake or something, it's already been all around. So some form of bureaucracy, I'm pro, especially in Europe and let's say politically organized entities. But in the end, it's something that's not, as previously said, it's being controlled, it's being created outside. So there is not a perfect question of whether and how that will all be implemented. I'm also pro-technology. So if we look at it as a tool, I'm as much as we can use it like for the things that we need, but also like try to create systems that will eventually seek the misusage, which is currently very hard because of the geopolitical situation. You have like global countries that don't literally talk to each other on these topics. So if some attack comes from the country which is outside of NATO or vice versa, they'll probably not exchange information. And this puts a problem in this entire thing, like more than it should probably be in the normal case. So
yeah, I mean, I like that you pose the bureaucracy and regulation around AI not necessarily as combative or zero sum with the innovation around AI. Sometimes, in certain cases, it might even help bolster it. Particularly when it helps sort of local industry grow, particularly when it helps assuage public concerns around the applications of this technology in politics. And I think that's a really important point for the year that we're in. 2024 is a global election year, right? More than half of the population of the world will go to the polls this year. And we're about to see, I think, record levels perhaps of a misapplication of artificial intelligence with political use cases. The kinds of mis and disinformation you can generate and the kinds of deepfake videos you can generate and the way that's exploded in just the last 2 years. I mean, you can just sort of start to think about the ramifications of that in a place like India, where digital literacy is still very low, right? There's massive rural communities that have never heard about AI, let alone AI. I mean, 20% of India still isn't connected to the electricity grid, right? And so when we sort of attack these questions perhaps of politics and AI, Robert, I want to turn to you briefly because you have this high-level view. And what are you most concerned about when you think about the application of artificial intelligence in context of the elections coming up this year, in context of the global trust deficit and how polarized our politics are? Does that pose a problem to how we regulate this?
Definitely, and I understand Bogdan's concerns when it comes to regulation of AI in the European space from the perspective of European competitiveness. It's a strong argument. But the idea that this phenomenon, this tool, is going to be non-regulated or regulated in a very, based on voluntary self-regulation, that's an utopia. The fact of the matter is, the nature of this tool is such, and its potential repercussions for the nature of human society and its evolution requires regulation. That's my view. I am a fundamental rights lawyer. So I'm now advising businesses from a fundamental rights perspective. However, where Bogdan is right is that it depends on how you regulate. And I do think, and I do agree, that the EU did more than it should have at this point in time. Because you can regulate in different ways. You can regulate comprehensively, transversally, non-sectorally, very prescriptively with massive sanctions and liability regimes. That's what the EU did. The UK is doing it differently. They're focusing on 5 key principles. They're doing it in a sort of a piecemeal way because they believe, as Bogdan said correctly, and Erin as well, is you need to be in a position to allow the tool to become more comprehensible. We're not talking about the black box phenomenon. We're looking about how output has effects on consequences. So yes, definitely, we need to be mindful of the way in which AI will completely overhaul the nature of human society. Mm-hmm. So that is what has to happen. I heard the same concerns in 2019 when the GDPR came into force. Mm-hmm. Global companies were saying, especially European companies were saying, oh my God, now we've regulated personal data in the EU, we're going to lose out on in a competitive posture. Well, what happened? The GDPR has become the global benchmark for personal data. It was integrated into in all the privacy regulations at state level in the US has GDPR type thematics involved in it. And I also say to the multinational clients, if you want to do, Europe is a massive market. The idea that the big tech companies are going to forsake the European Union because they've started to regulate AI, potentially in an overly progressive manner, I think that's also a utopia. Mm-hmm. The problem is going to be the regulator needs to be very careful. One of the things the EU AI Act requires is that companies create governance and risk management systems, which are going to be too expensive. They require, for some companies, not all, thankfully that was minimized in the legislative process, to impose a fundamental rights impact assessment, to assess actual or foreseeable risks of an AI system. If someone like me that has been doing human rights for 27 years is unable to explain to a company how the hell they're going to do a fundamental rights impact assessment, I'm sure the regulator has no idea how that's going to be done. So there are elements in the EU AI Act which are, they are visionary. They're supposed to be very sort of, the parliamentarian coming to say to the electorate, look what I did. I enacted an EU AI Act, which I did for you. But ultimately, it's for the regulator to make sense of it. And I think that's going to take a lot of time. So, the proof is in the pudding. And we will see how this develops over time. But these kinds of issues, electoral disinformation, the use of AI, for example, the way deep fakes are regulated under the... A deep fake is not a high-risk AI system under the EU AI Act. That is problematic. You only have to provide a transparency obligation. So in other words, you have to tell the outside world that this is actually a deep fake. But listen, ultimately you can have problems from freedom of expression. The idea was if you're going to create a high-risk management system for deepfakes, you're going to impose limitations on satirical free speech. But
Does that
ultimately,
not
that's problematic.
Does that not become regulated elsewhere though? So a deep fake, when a human being gets information, the brain doesn't know if it's real or fake, and then it's told that it's fake, but it still received all of this information, and the brain kind of doesn't know the difference in some regards. So the underlying message behind that, is that not where the regulation comes in with regards to voter manipulation and all of these issues?
So if you have an AI system which uses subliminal techniques for manipulation, those are prohibited systems. And they are distinguished under the AI Act. So deep fakes there is a definition, which is, there's very subtle differences there in many ways from classical deep fakes, which are meant to influence, and subliminal manipulation of AI systems, which are prohibited. So, I mean, I agree with the criticism when it comes to deep fakes. I'm thinking of my children, which they will not read the fine print that, scroll all the way down and says, this is a deep fake.
Or your parents.
Or the parents, indeed. So there are a lot of issues so I wouldn't take, and again, my message is, this is not black and white. It is not binary. There are benefits to this tool, which we definitely need to leverage. But we also shouldn't, we shouldn't start off in a manner where especially small and medium-sized businesses are going to have resource and compliance costs, which are going to go sky high and over the roof.
Yeah.
May I just...
Absolutely. I was just going to bring you in on this.
So the deepfake example is fantastic, why I think that this is completely wrong regarding the EU. How will they change this legislation? I mean, how long does it take in the EU to now amend the AI Act so that it actually now regulates this issue that we have with deepfake that they missed? It will take ages. Sorry, I mean, and we know this. The union is very quick to adopt legislation, so much so that by the time that they adopt an amendment to the AI Act, we'll probably have GPT-7. So in that sense, it's, in my opinion, a completely wrong way to do it. What the UK is doing, and I wasn't talking about the dystopian or utopian way of doing it, we don't regulate anything, that's misguided. The point is that you do it in a flexible, adaptive way, the way that the States are doing it, the way that the UK is doing it. And if we want to seek inspiration for Western Balkans and the countries that are outside of the EU, we should look at the US and the UK, not at the European Union. Because in my opinion, and it's a humble opinion, we have a union which is at this point, and we can see this in some other instances in international trade, is already now very much missing its place in the world in the sense of how much clout it has or how much clout it actually lacks. Europeans still believe